So Lotusland is our first episode, and it came about when I needed to buy a turntable. I had bought a few off of Craigslist, and they kept dying or weren't very good. And I did an online search around Vancouver, and lo and behold, there was this store that I'd never heard of, and they specialized in turntables. So I went and checked it out. I was blown away by the sheer amount of amazingly cool stuff that they had. And I've always been really interested in turntables and speakers, and so this was just heaven for me. I went there a number of times just picking up different things, and it was one of the inspirations for the series of, hey, here's this amazing store, and whenever I mentioned it to anyone, very few people seem to know about it. There's also a marijuana dispensary called Lotusland, so that probably confuses a few people, but it just was so incredible. And we approached Trent about shooting an episode there. He was game, and we spent 2 nights just thinking of all the different interesting ways that we could get footage of these beautiful pieces of tech. The crew was amazing for that shoot. Our cinematographer Christoph thought of all of these really creative, beautiful ways of getting footage of these receivers, and we even reflected a receiver onto Trent's glasses, and it was awesome to work with the footage.
So with Lotusland, what really intrigued me was filming, the haptic feeling of old vintage dials and buttons, and I used a lot of backlighting for that. And the other thing we did was using prisms, because especially with this blank metal, you create a lot of highlights that reflect beautifully in prisms. John had the idea to kind of have a feeling of the shop opening up in the morning. It's still dark and the car lights pass by. So we used 3 of our lights and put them outside of the shop and walked around a little with it. And then obviously just finding the right exposure, doing a little bit of a gimbal move on all the beautiful amplifiers he had in the shelf. I think that really came together well.
I chose to focus the edit mostly around Trent talking about how listening to music has changed. I mean, we all have hundreds of thousands of songs on our phone now, and just using earbuds or earphones versus the act of pulling out a record and placing it on the turntable and listening to it through decent speakers, I think is becoming a little bit more of a niche thing. But if you can experience that, I think it's the most fun way to listen to music. And the fact that there's a store in Vancouver dedicated to that, and certainly the last of its kind, I think, in the city itself, definitely worth checking out.